Welcome, Valen, to Kidney Transplant Conversations. Great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here.
We first met in Boston at the ATC conference, and we had a quick chat, which was very nice. It was great to get to know you a little bit. And then a little bit later, you sent me an invitation to a screening of your docuseries. So I didn't realize I was meeting kind of like a movie star of the transplant world.
Oh gosh. Well, it was so lovely to meet you in person, and then really excited that we were able to connect, and then you could tune into the docuseries screening.
So let's start by just talking a little bit about the docuseries. And they're very short, but each one is like a milestone of your kind of journey through transplant. It must be strange for you to listen to that whole thing back, like your life flashing in front of your eyes.
Yeah, it's been an incredible journey to create it. I've been a patient advocate now for around 18 years, and I really wanted to create a unique resource for our community and something that I wish I had. So I did break it down into 12 episodes that are topic based because I wanted this to be something that the community can watch in its entirety, like binge watch something on Netflix, or that they would be able to pick and choose what segments spoke to them at that time, because this journey has many chapters. So I wanted to outline it from diagnosis to post-transplant care and include caregivers. And if somebody went to the series and was a caregiver and just really wanted to focus on that, they could watch it, digest it, and come back when they were ready to watch more.
Your first surgery, you were very young, weren't you?
Yes, I had my first transplant when I was 19 years old, and that came from a living donor, and that was a kidney. And my second transplant was at 35 from a deceased liver donor. And it was really unique going through a transplant as a teenager and an adult. That's very different emotions and time periods in your life, and then receiving a living donation and deceased donation. So I feel like I have a really broad knowledge of this experience during really big different time periods in one's life.
One of your chapters in the docuseries is about finding your voice. Can you remember when you kind of made a transition from not having your voice to finding your voice? Can you remember what happened?
Oh, yes, there's a specific moment. I grew up really with no voice. I didn't really understand what I was going through. I was just enduring it, but not talking about it with my family. My parents were really my voice as my caregivers. Even in doctor appointments, I would sit there. The doctors would communicate with my parents. It got to the point where I just looked at my parents like they were going to answer the questions, which is terrible. I had, really no place in my journey besides going through it, but didn't find just my voice throughout it. And it wasn't until right after my kidney transplant until that switch happened. And it was after transplant, and my nurse came into the room and she had the little container with tons of medicine in, and she went to give it to me and she started to explain things to me, and I looked over at my mom as if okay, are you gonna write this down or help me with this? And the nurse was like, nope, this is you. This is your journey. You need to know it. And I was taken back by it. And at first I felt not supported and kind of didn't really know if I liked her. And then really I love her because she really taught such a valuable lesson of that. It was time for this to be in my hands and take ownership. And the thing is I think I was ready for so long. I just wasn't guided and encouraged and supported. And when that switch happened, so much blossomed. And I just really embraced being an advocate for myself, how empowered I was with that being in my own hands. And really that's where it grew from there, of being an advocate for not just myself, but others.
Do you think it felt less stressful once you kind of made that transition, that you were kind of taking a bit more control and that was more comfortable for you?
Absolutely, because it's so much, it's our body. We know how we feel. We experience everything. And to look to someone else, even if it's a close family member or caregiver, it's still not the same as being in our shoes. And it was really a whole new journey after me taking ownership of my care and really learning everything and speaking up for myself.
So now you have a platform and you are sharing your message with thousands of people. How does it feel to have that kind of exposure?
It really is humbling. It's something that I've done for many years. I started back in my early 20s doing this work. And I think seeing the impact that it has on others has really been what has fueled my passion. An example is after I shared my story on stage for the first time, the individuals that came up afterwards and seeing the weight that was lifted off of their shoulders, hearing them say, my mom went through that too, or I go through that. And all of a sudden, it still gives me goosebumps to this day talking about it because I can remember the exact individuals that spoke to me, realizing that connection and the bond that we had formed. At that moment, I realized the opportunity that I had before me to use my firsthand experiences to help others. And that's really where it led from public speaking to writing, collaborating with organizations, and then most recently, my storytelling, the docuseries called Letters of Hope.
And one of the chapters in Letters of Hope is devoted to caregivers. And I know your partner, Noah, has been very active in taking care of you. Could you talk a little bit about why that's so important? And also maybe share your thoughts on do we have enough resources for caregivers?
I've experienced immense unconditional love and support from my parents as a child, which helped get me into adulthood. And I didn't really know if I'd ever find a partner that would be able to take on such a complicated health history as myself. It's a lot of work. It's not a normal life in your 30s going through all of this. And I was so fortunate to find Noah. And his qualities are even different than my parents and very impactful in adulthood. And of course, is different when you receive that support from a spouse versus parents. I've been a patient since 5 years old. So I've, experienced all the dynamics through this journey and transition with caregivers. It is just so valuable. I just always think of when I went through transplant evaluation that the only thing that was in bold print and underlined was that I couldn't go through transplant evaluation if I didn't have a caregiver. And that right there shows how important they are and vital through this journey. And then it makes me sad for people that don't have caregivers to help support them. And this shows how important it is to care for them. That's the thing I've learned through it. I've seen the impact it's had negative on my parents because of them devoting too much of their time. It has then taught me lessons that even though my husband is caring for me, it's also important for me to care for him as well. And it's hard for caregivers to think of themselves in the midst of a life and death situation of a loved one needing a transplant and going through that. And yes, I absolutely think that more support is needed. And that's why through my work, I always bring caregivers into the journey because they are a part of it and they need to be supported and cared for as well.
What do you think for caregivers is the biggest challenge for them? What do you think is the hardest part for caregivers?
Well, I can quote my husband on it of he says the feeling of being helpless, feeling like he wants to fix things and make it better and that he can't. He couldn't make everything better, right away when I needed a transplant and he wanted to, and he felt helpless during times when I was extremely ill and in the hospital. But the thing is for them to understand their support and them just being there physically, knowing that we're cared for and we're loved and we have somebody to speak on our behalf if we're unable to because we're so sick, that's life changing. And even in healthy times, having a caregiver and having that comfort of knowing that should something go wrong, you have somebody there And he gives me something to look forward to. We try and live the best life that we can, even in sick times and of course healthy times, but we still try to find joy in every day, even in the hospital, find humor and things that would make us laugh and something to look forward to. So there's really endless facets of the importance and good that comes from caregivers.
So that is your key strategy for kind of reducing stress. It's looking for joy, looking for humor.
Oh my gosh, yes. I grew up in a very joking around household where you need to be able to take it because we're all ready to just jump on and pick on one another, and of course in a loving way. So having that light and laughter has been so important to never lose sight of that. And it's really hard during dark and challenging times, but it's like, how can you find that little bit of joy, even if it's just getting some fresh air? Like I've a story with my dad. That has been instilled in me since my youth. I was extremely ill at Johns Hopkins at 19 years old, waiting for a transplant, and I needed to go in for a surgery to place a line in for dialysis. And they come to my room, transport to take me there. And my dad says, she needs to see the outside. She needs to get outside. And they're like, well, sir, we're going to go like this way. And she's in a bed. We can't take her outside. Well, my dad convinced them. We went the long way. We went downstairs. They opened the doors. They took me outside and then took me back in another building before the operation. And I'll never forget the blue sky and the clouds and that fresh air just for a glimmer. So even if we could just get a little bit of that during our day, the joy that brought me. And my dad knew you just need to give her something normalcy outside, something that will just make her feel like all of this isn't really going on, and sort of ground me in gratitude and give me that hope.
Because when you're in that hospital situation, you're really constantly immersed in a medical environment, aren't you? You're surrounded by equipment, you're surrounded by medical professionals, other patients.
Yes.
So
yes.
For you, just having that window was immensely important.
Yes, we were there over the winter time at Johns Hopkins, and my dad was adamant on me getting outside. And there was a time period where he wheeled me outside and I was wrapped in blankets like a mummy. And the only thing you could see is my eyes, and he was determined to get me out of that hospital. So I think it takes that determination, the focus on finding a little bit of joy, a little bit of normalcy, because we get so consumed with all that's going on.
Kind of like taking a breath.
Yep, trying to catch your breath through it all, which really taking it one step and one day at a time has been vital. And you may seem like that just seems, okay, silly. But during heading into liver transplant, I woke up and thought to myself, what do I need to do today in order to get to the next step and closer to transplant? Was it calling the coordinator and asking if she got these results and got it to the next person yet? Like, that's literally how my mind was every day of like, okay, what's the next step? Just focus on today, because the big picture is so overwhelming.
And I love the way your docuseries does go kind of chronologically through all the key steps. My interpretation looking at those was that the toughest stage for you was the time when you were on the waiting list. Would that be right?
I love that you said that, and I appreciate your sentiments. It's so nice to hear what you think of the series and kind of, what you've taken away from it. I really wanted the viewer to understand the gravity of that time period, because I think it's hard for the healthy outside world to really understand what it is like to be that close to death and just waiting for a phone call or waiting for a living donor to step forward. Just the gravity of what that feels like. So I, take you through the couple first segments, and then all of a sudden segment 6 of living in the waiting zone has a completely different feel, because your life has a different feel, and you can just kind of get some insight into what that's like. I mean, when you get worked up for transplant and you're on the wait list only if you're severely ill and that close to, close to not making it and needing this needing an organ. So I wanted to try and have this not only be a resource and empowerment for patients, but also education for society at large, so that people outside of our communities can gain some empathy and insight into the world of transplantation and what it's like to be in our shoes.
And you really bring that story to life in a way that I think people who are not connected to transplant can really relate to. And if there's one thing I learned from attending the transplant games is that ultimately we can all be connected to transplant simply by registering as donors.
That's an amazing sentiment. It is so true. And it just, I think that's the importance of getting this conversation out in the open about transplantation, so that it can be a comfortable conversation to have in anybody's home, that they don't have to know somebody or be personally impacted, that we can just all be better educated, so we can all have conversations and make the decision to say yes to organ donation and be comfortable and have educated facts on it. And that's what is just another important thing, is getting outside of our community. Our community is amazing. I love everybody in the transplant community, but in order for us to broaden the education, we need to be able to find platforms to go beyond our community, to talk to students who are about to get their driver's license. Because I know when I got my driver's license and was at the DMV, I checked yes, but I didn't understand what that was and necessarily what checking yes meant. And I think if we can show this visual representation of the impact somebody has, that they can have on somebody's life by saying yes, we can empower people to want to say yes and leave the legacy of helping others.
Yeah, and understanding just what an immensely meaningful thing it is that you're saying yes to. It's not just a tick box. It's a lot more than that.
Absolutely.
And we mentioned that you were in your teens when you had your kidney transplant. So you've already been post-transplant for many years and many more years to come. So what are your thoughts on how do you stay in great condition? How do you kind of optimize the fact that you're taking immunosuppressants? And how often should you be kind of reporting things like side effects and symptoms and niggles to your healthcare team? How often should you be staying engaged kind of in the long term?
Gosh, all really amazing sentiments. Thank you for these important questions. I actually just celebrated my 20th kidney transplant anniversary.
Yeah.
And I know, thank you. And just celebrated my 4-year liver transplant anniversary. So this second half of my life has been made possible because of 2 selfless organ donors. I mean, it's just wild to think that I was that 19-year-old of my parents living in the Ronald McDonald House, and family was called down to say their goodbyes at times, and then to think of being here feeling so healthy and vibrant and just in the best health that I've been in years. And this is another important thing to understand, is that it's a lifelong journey. So when I think of being a transplant recipient, I really think of it being a life of living immunosuppressed. And that's why I did one of the segments on living immunosuppressed, because I wanted it to be not just medical, but actually like, what does that feel like? What does it entail and how does it change your life? But also to understand that while we have responsibilities, we can still live a full life. That's the important thing that I always want to share. So for my maintenance at this point, for being 20 years out, is I take around 20 pills a day. And that's a variety. 2 of them are anti-rejection medicines. But, when you're post-transplant, you can be low on magnesium and things like that, and, have to take supplements. So I get monthly lab work done, and that varies per transplant recipients. But because of complicated health history, I get monthly labs. I follow up with my kidney doctor every 4 months, and I am very engaged in my health and with my doctors. Because of being in tune with my body and always relaying any change, I am still alive today. Because back when I had sepsis episodes before liver transplant, one of those episodes could have easily killed me. But because I immediately acted on I don't feel good. This is different. I'm going to immediately tell my doctor. That led to me getting care soon and being able to get healthy again. An example is when we're throwing up, we can't keep our medicine down, and our medicine is vital and why we're able to stay alive. If I have a fever, it's different than a healthy person, and I immediately go to the emergency room because if my body's responding like that, there's definitely something that needs to be looked into. Having a suppressed immune system, you respond differently like that to illness. It can be more severe for us than others. And we have different risks like skin cancer because we have a suppressed immune system. And there's certain infections like CMV and EBV and BK virus that for a normal person, their immune system might be able to suppress some infections. And ours, when our immune system is suppressed, they can come out and we have to deal with them. So there's a lot of things that you have to learn along the way of how our body is going to respond differently because of being immunosuppressed, but that hasn't held me back from living a full life. I travel, we go on RV trips. You learn how to lay out your medicine, get it organized, make it just a part of your day and not have it be a burden. I look at all of this as a responsibility that I'm fortunate to have. I look at these as that I'm honored to take medicine and take good care of myself because it's a way to thank my donors and show that I care for the gift that I've been given. So I think it's just really important for us to get very educated on the different things that we have to look out for and for us not to sit on things like, oh, I felt funny in this area for a week, but yeah, I haven't said anything. Like, no, like you have to just communicate with your doctors regularly, speak up about any changes because the sooner you can get things looked into, the better.
You have got coming up another event, haven't you? Tell me about this event with Donate Life Hollywood.
I do. This has been a really exciting month. It was amazing last week to share Letters of Hope for the first time in its entirety with the community. And I look at this as an evergreen resource that I hope years from now, someone that will find out they need a transplant or a post-transplant will find this docuseries and be able to gain empowerment and education and hope from it. And I am honored that next week I will be attending the Donate Life Hollywood Inspire Awards event because our docuseries, Letters of Hope, which has been sponsored by Thermo Fisher Scientific, is receiving an Inspire Award. And I'm really, really excited because we're going to be sharing the stage with famous writers and producers in Hollywood of shows like Grey's Anatomy and Robin Roberts' docuseries of Last Chance Transplant. And we are all being honored at this event for accurate portrayals of organ donation and storytelling in Hollywood, because that's very important. If somebody watches a show and they see it told in not an accurate light, it can potentially change their decision on wanting to be an organ donor. So that's what Donate Life Hollywood is all about, of providing education and making sure these storylines in Hollywood are told positively and accurately. And I'm just really honored to be able to be one of those that is being honored. And I think it's really exciting to be able to have a patient there for these writers and producers to see a real life story so they can gain insight into what we really go through and hopefully include that accurate information into their storytelling.
Congratulations. That's so exciting.
Thank you.
So Donate Life Hollywood actually is acting as a resource for producers, writers who are telling stories on TV, in the movies, and making sure that they have an accurate understanding of what is reality here, rather than just guessing or making it up.
Absolutely. Because if you think about it, on these medical shows, you actually see transplant included quite often because it's very dramatic. It's life and death, and the storyline can be easily, I think, dramatized. And we just want to make sure that it doesn't go too far that it's going to make somebody feel like something happens that doesn't really happen, like selling organs and things like that, that you don't want people to think any type of myth. And this Donate Life Hollywood is a part of One Legacy, and it's really an important initiative. And I'm grateful to be a part of Donate Life Hollywood and help them. And then this is just incredibly meaningful to be honored for the storytelling that I'm doing through my docuseries.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing all of this information with us. For our listeners, what is the easiest way for them to find the Letters of Hope series?
That would be going to my website, which is valenkeefer.com.
Okay, I'm going to put that link in the summary for this episode. And if they were to Google it, if they just Google Letters of Hope Valen, and that's Valen as in Valentine, they're going to find it, right?
I haven't done that yet, so that's why I would suggest, I know it's all easy on my website, so that would be my first recommendation.
And then the spelling of the website, ValenKeefer.com.
You got it.
Okay. So let's close. Just any closing thoughts or calls to action for our listeners that you'd like to leave them with?
My hope through my storytelling and being an active member in the community is to really just empower individuals, because just getting diagnosed and finding out that you need a transplant can be really scary. And my hope is to be the visual representation that I wish I had when I was younger, to show that we can get through it, and the importance of finding our voice and having that empowerment, and that despite all that we go through, we can live a full life. And I didn't have that knowledge. I didn't have a voice. I didn't know anybody else going through the same thing. And now being an adult, I see how powerful that is. And so my hope is that nobody else will go through the journey alone like I did. And I'm really looking forward to the community seeing the series, and I hope that they gain a lot of insight and hope, and that it really helps them through this journey. We really have a remarkable community that I'm just honored to be a part of. I hope that those just getting introduced to transplant will find comfort in that too.
Valen, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been an honor.